Jack's antennae twitched in alarm as he reviewed the medical reports for the third time that cycle. As the head physician of the Galactic Youth Exchange Program station, he'd treated everything from Zentarii molt complications to Plixian digestive reversals. But this was unprecedented. 300% increase in rib fractures, he muttered, his 4 eyes scanning the datapad. All among the human juveniles. In just 2 standard months, the humans called them children. Though Jack found the term inadequate for describing members of a species that had conquered their death world through sheer stubbornness and an unsettling tolerance for pain. These particular specimens were between 8 and 12 solar cycles old, sent to the station as part of the Cultural Exchange Initiative meant to integrate humanity into the wider galactic community. It had seemed like such a promising idea at the start. Mira, the human liaison officer, entered his medical bay with that peculiar bipedal gait her species favored. She was young by human standards, barely into her 3rd decade, but she carried herself with the confidence of a seasoned warrior. Then again, all humans carried themselves that way. It was unnerving. "You wanted to see me, Doc?" she asked, using the human diminutive that Jack had learned to tolerate. "Miss Mira, we have a serious situation." Jack swiveled his observation chair to face her fully. "The human juveniles under our care are experiencing an epidemic of skeletal damage, specifically fractured ribs. I need to understand what's causing this before the Galactic Council shuts down the entire exchange program." Mira's facial features arranged themselves in what Jack had learned to recognize as confusion. Her forward-facing predator eyes narrowed slightly. "Rib fractures? How many kids are we talking about?" 17 cases in the past 2 months. That's nearly half of the human juveniles on this station. Jack pulled up a holographic display, showing the medical scans. The pattern is consistent across all cases. Minor fractures, clean breaks, healing well. But the frequency is alarming. Have you asked them how it happened? Of course. Jack's antennae drooped in frustration. Their answers make no sense. They claim it happened during something they call hugging. I've reviewed the human cultural database, and hugging is described as a gesture of affection and bonding. A gentle embrace. How does a gentle embrace fracture reinforced bone structures? Something shifted in Mira's expression. Her mouth curved upward at the corners, revealing her omnivorous teeth in what humans called a smile. Jack had learned this expression could mean many things, from genuine joy to predatory satisfaction. This particular smile seemed to contain elements of both amusement and resignation. "Oh no," she said, and then began making that peculiar huffing sound humans produced when experiencing humor. "Explain," Jack demanded, his concern growing. Was there some kind of human juvenile combat ritual he'd missed in his research? Mira composed herself, though her eyes still held that gleam of amusement. "Okay, so here's the thing about human kids. When they like each other, when they become friends, they hug. You got that part right." "Yes, but let me finish." Mira held up one 5-fingered hand. "Human children, especially the younger ones, haven't fully developed their proprioception yet. That's our sense of where our body is in space and how much force we're using. Combine that with the fact that humans are, well, stronger than most species in the galactic community." Jack's antennae shot straight up in horror. "You're telling me your juveniles are fracturing each other's ribs through affection?" "Accidentally, yes." Mira nodded. "They're hugging each other the way they'd hug human friends back home. But everyone else on this station is, frankly, more fragile than they're used to. The Zentarii kids have hollow bones for flight. The Plixians have cartilaginous structures. Even the Krellian juveniles, who are pretty sturdy, have a different bone density than humans." "This is absurd," Jack said. Though even as he spoke, the data began to make terrible sense. "Your species' juveniles are causing injury through gestures of friendship?" "Pretty much." Mira pulled up a chair, the station furniture creaking under what was, by galactic standards, considerable mass. Look, humans evolved on a high-gravity world where everything was trying to kill us. We developed robust skeletal structures, dense musculature, and ridiculous healing factors just to survive. Our kids are literally built tougher than most adult aliens. Jack reviewed the medical files again with this new context. The fractures were indeed minor by human standards. What would be a serious injury requiring extensive treatment for a Zentari would barely slow down a human juvenile. Several of the injured aliens had been released and returned to play with their human friends the very next day. Wait, Jack said, a new horror dawning. You said they went back to playing together? After being injured? Well, yeah. Mira looked confused by his confusion. They're friends. A couple of cracked ribs isn't going to stop kids from hanging out. Besides, the human kids feel terrible when they accidentally hurt someone. They're trying to be more careful. Trying? Jack's voice rose an octave. Miss Mira, trying implies they're still engaging in this behavior. Of course they are. They're not going to stop hugging their friends, Doc. That would be like asking them to stop breathing. Physical affection is hardwired into human psychology. Mira leaned forward, her predator eyes meeting his own. What we need to do is teach them better control, and maybe warn the other species' kids about human strength. Over the next several days, Jack watched in fascination as Mira implemented what she called Operation Gentle Touch. She gathered the human juveniles and explained the situation with a directness that Jack found admirably efficient. The young humans listened with wide eyes, clearly distressed by the idea that they'd been hurting their friends. But we were just hugging. One small human named Tommy protested, his eyes leaking that strange saline solution humans produced when distressed. I know, buddy, Mira said gently. But you're stronger than you realize. We need to teach you how to hug alien friends differently than human friends. What followed was perhaps the strangest training session Jack had ever witnessed. Mira brought in pressure sensors and taught the human juveniles to monitor their grip strength. She demonstrated the difference between a human hug and what she called an alien hug, which looked disturbingly gentle for a species Jack was increasingly convinced could tear apart most station fixtures with their bare hands. The young humans practiced on calibrated dummies, learning to embrace with a fraction of their normal strength. Jack watched a juvenile named Sarah, no more than 9 solar cycles old, successfully reduce her hugging pressure by 70%. It was still strong enough to restrain a full-grown Plixian, but it no longer registered as potentially rib-breaking on the sensors. This is insane, Jack muttered to Mira as they observed the training. Your species has to train its young, not to accidentally crush other beings with affection. Welcome to humanity, Doc. Mira's smile was wry. We're a species of walking disasters who somehow made it to the stars. This is just par for the course. The rib fracture rate dropped significantly over the following weeks, though it never quite reached 0. Young humans, Jack learned, were enthusiastic and impulsive, and sometimes they forgot to regulate their strength in moments of excitement. But the other alien juveniles didn't seem to mind as much as Jack expected. They'd formed genuine bonds with their human friends, and a few cracked ribs were apparently an acceptable price for those friendships. One day, Jack found a young Zentarii named Chirip in the medical bay, sporting a hairline fracture in her wing structure. When he asked what happened, she chirped happily. Marcus gave me a goodbye hug before his family rotated off station. It was worth it. Jack simply stared at her, his antennae limp with resignation. That evening, he updated his report to the Galactic Council. The rib fracture epidemic had been explained and addressed. Human juveniles were not engaged in secret combat training or experiencing a mysterious disease. They were simply being affectionate in the way their species evolved to be, which unfortunately involved enough force to damage most known sapient species. The Council's response was brief. Typical humans. Proceed with exchange program. Consider adding padding to alien participants. Jack looked at Mira, who had read the response over his shoulder. She was grinning again. What? She asked innocently. Your species, Jack said slowly, has made the rest of the galaxy consider mandatory protective equipment for childhood friendship. Yeah, Mira agreed cheerfully. Sounds about right. We're awesome like that. Jack decided he needed a very strong drink. Possibly several. Being the chief physician for human juveniles, he was learning, was going to require developing coping mechanisms that his medical training had never covered. But as he watched through the observation window, seeing a young human carefully, gently embrace a Krellian friend who was departing the station, both of them with moisture in their eyes, Jack had to admit something. For all their destructive capability and frightening strength, humans possessed something the galaxy desperately needed: the ability to form bonds so strong they literally couldn't contain them. They were predators who chose friendship, warriors who led with affection, and deathworlders who cared so deeply they had to be taught not to accidentally break the things they loved. Perhaps a few fractured ribs were a small price to pay for that. His antennae perked up with something that might have been hope. The galaxy was certainly going to be interesting with humans in it.